Hey everybody, this is Linda Misegadis, and you're listening to An Unconventional Guide to Success, the show that talks about real life with real people for those of you who are interested in learning from others the steps they took on their journey towards success as defined by them. We have an exciting lineup of guests for Season 3 and hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome to the studio. It's so good to see you, Scott, and welcome, Katelyn. We're so happy to have you here.
Yeah. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Linda. Good to see
This
you.
is going to be a
we're having
fun
a good time
one.
today.
It's so good to see you as well. I know we were talking the other day that we've been a little remiss on connecting with one another. Our schedules have been so crazy. You and those pesky children and me and this pesky job. So
I have a job and the children though, so at least you're halfway done.
Right, I know. You're right. I've at least got the empty nest side of it, which definitely helps. So I don't have that piece.
Well, great
anymore,
segue. If it wasn't for Katelyn, we wouldn't have the time to do this because we're doing the kids together.
That's right. Yes, I know you got a partner in crime, which is
Totally.
awesome. Well, let me introduce Katelyn to our audience today. We're so excited to have Katelyn here. Katelyn is actually the owner and president of Worldgate, which is a company that Scott and Katelyn run together. And she's the founder of Worldgate and is really responsible for helping to define Worldgate's vision, values, and policies and corporate strategy. In addition, Katelyn is responsible for all internal operations, including human resources, finance, and internal communications. She brings over 30 years of management experience across both small and enterprise businesses. I know, I always hate to say that stuff out loud, right? When I said, I'm like, yeah, I have 30 plus experience. And on one hand, I'm like, good for you, Linda. And then on the other hand, I'm like, am I really been working that long?
She has 3 plus 0.
Yeah.
3 plus 0 years.
Right? I know. 3 plus 0. Exactly. I know. It's so crazy, but it's amazing, really, with the experience across small and enterprise businesses, particularly in the IT, telecommunications, not-for-profit sectors. And in her executive leadership roles, she's been responsible for setting strategic direction and overseeing implementation of several large-scale initiatives. Katelyn earned her MBA from the University of Maryland, College Park, and is proud to be an alumnus of the University of New Hampshire. Katelyn's also passionate about Worldgate's programs to give back, and I see you doing this stuff all the time, to the community, including their public school there in Maryland, in Virginia area, and youth sports philanthropy programs. So welcome to the studio. It's so nice to have you here.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, no.
You're welcome.
Yes, yeah, no.
I was going to say thanks for being here, honey.
I'm glad it worked out.
But I wasn't sure how to play that.
Yeah. That's okay. Yeah. You could say that. She's your honey. That's it. That's the advantage. So no, it's really good.
Let's break the ice early.
Yes. Yeah, let's break the ice early. Well, and speaking of that, I was like to kind of have a little bit of an icebreaker. Katelyn, I was rib Scott about this because he tries to be so serious in this interview, and I'm like, you got to break the ice a little bit. So I twist his arm and make him come along with me on these ones. But if you could hang out with any cartoon character, who would you choose and why?
So, I will admit and appreciate that I had this question to prepare for. So I was able to give it some thought because I have not thought about that at all before. But, I thought about Winnie the Pooh. Like, how lovely is Pooh Corner, right? And how much would you love to just sit next to Winnie the Pooh all day, who is such a lovely friend, and all the quotes that come out of, how you should treat people and be a partner and be a friend. And I just thought about, could we just sit at that tree stump and chat and, have fun watching our crazy friend Tigger, right? But just, he's sweet and kind. And wouldn't that just be a nice place to be for a day, right?
I love that. And, I'm not surprised that that's who you selected, honestly, because thinking about, who you are as a person, and I'm getting to know you over the years, that doesn't surprise me that Pooh would be a good pal to you. Now, see, I'm the polar opposite because I would go with Deadpool. If I could hang out, I love Deadpool, and I love his complete disregard for any authority or any social norms or anything. And I think, gosh, if just in the moment, I could just be that authentic to whatever I was feeling in the moment. Deadpool is more so. Certainly not the kind, thoughtful that Pooh
Well,
would bring to
Pooh might not be as exciting for the, more than a day, right? But
Mhm.
yes.
More than a
No,
day.
but I love that. And I had thought about that, but I do love reading the little
Yes.
Pooh-isms out there. And I've actually had that book, The Tao of Pooh. My husband got that for me a long time ago. And it is such a great book. And Scott, I always ask you, because you can change all the time, which is great with our episodes, because you don't have to be the same guy every time
I
you
keep
go,
sticking with
so.
the Incredible Hulk. We know this.
You do.
All for the greater good, and all good until it's not. Right? So
Yeah.
flip the switch and off I go.
That is very true. No, well, and the more that I hear you say that, the more I do see that side. It's because you've got that Bruce Banner kind of, yeah, I'm friends with everyone, everything's going well. And then you've got that moment where, okay, Bruce has got to take a seat out, Hulk's got to come in, because now things are making me a little crazy, and you kind of blow off there. But even there, it's a controlled
It's a controlled chaos, and I'd like to hope that it's for the greater good and not just crazy, like the Incredible Hulk.
Just crazy. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Let's just say it's to protect Winnie the Pooh.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I like that. That's a good tie back.
And
absolutely.
I was thinking,
no, that's
when
wonderful.
Katelyn was saying, wouldn't it be great to sit on that stump with Winnie the Pooh? I'm thinking to myself, and aren't we giving trees at this phase in our lives? And that's about what's left. We're all the stumps of a giving tree.
No. That is true. That is very true. We are kind of at that stage in our lives. Well, what I love about this particular episode and getting to have Katelyn on is that it's the other side. So we, Scott and I spend a lot of time talking with our guests, and we hear their stories, and we've discussed Scott's book, How Did You Get Here? And just kind of like the whole idea of the Unconventional Guide to Success. It's nice to meet the other side of that, because one of the foundations of Scott's message is around partnerships and relationships, and you're his key partner and relationship in all of this. So tell us, how did you meet Scott? I mean, we know Scott's side of the story, but let's hear your side. How did you meet Scott?
Well, it's funny because it doesn't sound so glamorous, right? It wasn't like we saw each other from afar, but we met in a staff meeting. So I was an intern when I was in grad school. I interned for what was Bell Atlantic at the time, now Verizon. But I was in a larger staff meeting, and Scott came from a different building to join this larger staff meeting. And he was flexing, not kidding, flexing, literally flexing. Probably ate
I'd like to be shocked by
donuts.
that, Katelyn, but
I think he ate all the donuts that were provided at the staff meeting, and was just gregarious and funny, and all this, right? And so,
yes.
So that's where we officially met. And then we, back in the day when you would do things like corporate golf tournaments and, things like that, we had the opportunity to spend the day together at a staff golf outing, and then, spent some time together after. So that was really the beginnings.
Yeah, our first date was from that golf outing. We had a dinner meeting, and then after dinner, I said, "Hey, can we go grab a drink? Let's see what this is all about." And sure, if we didn't, and then I think we've seen each other every day since.
Yeah. Well, and not everybody can do that. I mean, that does speak to,
I did kind of roll my eyes tonight. Every day since.
Every day we see each other. No, but I do think that is so important, because not everybody has that type of a relationship where you can spend that much time together. I listened to so many people through the pandemic and say, their marriages actually took a toll. Some of them didn't even survive through that, where all of a sudden they were almost, this is a strong word, but forced to be in the same room together frequently. And like for Jim and I, very natural. It was no transition whatsoever for us. I mean, I've been working at home for a long time, but we're best friends. We hang out all the time together. So the transition wasn't like, oh, I can't believe I have to spend all this time together. And I think that speaks a lot to the relationship that you have developed, and that you can have both a personal life and a work life together. Not everybody can do that.
I think it's important too that you add on to that, Kate and I dated for 4 years. We tested that. We nurtured
Yeah.
that. We talked about that. We communicated about our feelings in that courtship. And that only makes it stronger. And we
Yeah.
continue to bring that to our relationship today. I mean, we sat in COVID, we bitched to each other about how hard it was that it was only each other we were seeing. And we came to
Yeah.
solutions where we were bringing friends to the garage, or we would stay on different floors for 48 hours just to be away from each other.
Yeah.
So communication, also a chapter in the book, is really important. But when you get into relationships, the key in that for me and sharing with the next generation is don't just settle. Work with what your gut tells you, and work with your partner. And that's two-sided.
Yeah.
I don't always practice what I preach, but Katelyn will pull me in kite string, or I'll pull her in if she's not working with me the way we need to. But it's really important. And so it doesn't happen overnight. It is not work. It is meant to be. I think I've known Katelyn longer as a human than I've known myself independent of Katelyn. So, and those years are starting to creep in on us. And I would have it no other way. Like, I'm actually looking more forward to those times together where we're not distracted by other people. She's dreading it, and I'm pulling her in. I get you all to myself.
Well, and I mean, Scott, you say it doesn't take work, but like the work piece does and did, right? Like figuring out how to work together was a learning process. And there were some, hard days that just where we potentially just weren't aligned in how we wanted to approach things, right? But I think where we came out of that was this idea of really having strong delineation around what each of us is responsible for, and appreciating each other's strengths. Right.
Yeah.
So like there are
right.
and weaknesses, right, or challenges. So there are areas that I know that I can support Scott in, right? There are areas where he supports me. So, when we talk numbers, he wants to see 3 numbers. I want to see 7,000, right? Like,
right.
No, that's really important awareness.
Yeah. So it is.
Yeah.
It took a while to figure out the best way to do that. And now I feel like we're on a really good path of how we respect each other and our strengths, and where we pull each other in when it's helpful and necessary. But we have to trust each other that we each have our domains, if you will. So
yeah. I love that.
The other,
well, and that's a good segue. Oh, go ahead, Scott.
The other piece of that is, and I've learned this along the way, we are never ill-intended with each other. You're never ill-intended with each other. And that's harder for Kate with the Incredible Hulk, who likes to spray emotion out, even if it's not directed at her. It is aimed at her. And that's hard if you're not aware of, oh, he's not ill-intended at me. This is just, he's expressing himself the way he does. She's expressing herself in a Winnie the Pooh way, doesn't. So just recognizing the foundation is not ill-intended is literally half of it for me, more than half. Because style and
it's intention, right? It's understanding the intention behind it. And I think that that's a really good point. A lesson I'm still continuing to learn is it's not about you. Like I have to remember that actually Jim says this to me all the time when he's sharing something with me and I'm saying how that's affecting me, instead of saying to him, I understand now that's affecting you, and being in his truth in his moment. And that's really, that's been something that I have to try to remember, that when in that moment, it's not about me. It's about Jim. It's about how he's feeling, about how it's impacting him. It has absolutely nothing to do with me. And that's a lesson that I'm still trying to, factor in all aspects of my life, even in work. I'm recognizing like, it's not about you. It's about this situation. It doesn't matter how I feel. It's what is the situation. So Katelyn, that's a good segue as to, because you have this business together, what's the one thing about your business that you didn't expect, like going into all of this, and kind of what's kind of come out of this that you were like, wow, I did not expect this.
I did not expect this sheer magnitude of responsibility that I would feel. I mean, it is.
Oh yeah.
We are responsible for our team, right? And I think when you're working in the corporate environment, yes, you might be a boss or a manager, and yes, you might have personal development responsibility, or you might have P&L responsibility. But I feel every decision I make, there is like a sheer magnitude of this. I have responsibility for these, almost 100 people now, right? Like the buck stops here,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
every decision that I make
Yeah.
potentially is going to impact one or more of my team members from a positive or negative, right?
Yeah.
And I think,
Right.
again, being in the corporate world, I certainly had a lot of responsibility, but it was different. It didn't
Yep.
feel the way that it
Yeah.
feels, owning your own business and being the ultimate decision maker, right? Like there's just,
Yeah, the buck
yeah,
stops here, right?
yeah.
It's yeah,
So,
that
I
is
mean,
and
I feel
yeah,
lucky,
I love
right? I
that.
feel lucky
No.
that I feel like I am a person who's going to ideally try to make everyone's lives better, right? But there's just something that
Right,
goes along with
right.
that you're like, oh, this is it's a big shoulder to carry.
Yes.
Well, and there's so many different.
It is. It's a huge
Yeah.
responsibility. Yeah.
And there's so many different personalities in that, and there's so many different intentions. And
Yeah.
while the other side of the magnitude of responsibility is also the of keeping them employed and being a correct and learning mindset leader is also training them, building them up to be them best selves, helping them move to a different
Right.
organization if their trajectory is different than ours. And there's just
You're
such
right.
a magnitude, is such a good word on that. And it really is hard.
Yeah.
Part of the gift, it's
Right. Yeah. And not everybody's cut out, which is what we talk about, which is great about an unconventional guide to success, because I do think that, there are people who have that entrepreneurial mindset and really are good to go out. But I love that you said that that's not what you expected, was just the sheer magnitude of responsibility, and that you would feel all of that weight, because you're right. For me, I like the security of the corporate world, because to your point, it, I'm not ultimately responsible. So it's not sitting out, it's not resting solely on my shoulders. And so decisions that are being made, I can say, well, hey, that's the corporate line. That's what's happening. Where for you, you are the corporate line. And that does, that's a whole different scope of responsibility, and an important one for people to think about as they're, kind of going in that direction. So there's a lot that comes with it.
It's a gift.
So
well,
go
I was
ahead,
going to
Scott.
say it's a gift, and it's a lot more than people realize. They throw the word entrepreneurial around a lot, and they throw the word
Yes.
small business around as if
Totally agree.
it's if you hold it the way Katelyn and I try to, and that is responsible, magnitude, growth,
Yeah.
success, continuity, versus
Right.
profits, use you till you're gone, kick you out. There's two different styles of that, but
Yeah.
that word entrepreneurial has a lot of different meanings for the young viewers and listeners of this podcast. You really have to have the drive and the fight to push through that. And you also,
You
in my
do.
experience, to compliment Katelyn, you also have to have the right partner. And I'm
Oh,
very clear
1,000%.
on that
Yeah.
in the book, that it's her there, and she's very clear with that with me. And it goes back to delineation of responsibility. And it took us about 2 years, 3 years to figure that out in business, when we finally went, all right, I'm handling this and you handle that, and we'll meet in the middle. And it makes
Well, that's a good segue into my next
yeah
question, is around the kite and the string,
yeah
right?
yeah
So in Scott's book, he talks about the kite and the string. So I'd love to get your perspective on that, Katelyn, because again, I know what Scott's perspective. I read the book and I've heard him talk about it, but I haven't heard your perspective
I
on
mean,
that.
I'm the one that said it to Scott, right? And I don't remember
Yeah.
where I had heard it, right? But I had heard it somewhere, like at
Yeah.
a leadership conference, or, read it in a book. I cannot remember it. I'm going to have to Google it and search for
Yeah.
it. But it was just a really, like, the way that it was described and the way I said it to Scott is, there's this idea, right? That there's this kite, right? And a kite is flying and
Mm-hmm.
soaring and trying new things and opening new businesses and up there in the clouds, right? The visionary,
Yeah.
um, but a kite has a string, right? And the string is there to guide it, ideally just to guide it, right? And not to pull it down.
Yeah.
And so when I first brought it up with
Yeah.
him, I was asking, like, you have these grand plans, these super entrepreneurial ideas, these visions. Like, I feel like
Yeah.
I'm always the person that's like, well, what about these risks? And what about this compliance issue? And what about this? And so is that,
Yeah.
pulling it down, or is it guiding it? And hopefully, for the most part, it's a guide. The string is a guide versus a tug.
Oh, and our kids, and
I
our
like
kids,
it.
and I've said all along in our situation, it 100% is, but it was me jumping the shark to say that how we got there to make it a guide is through delineation, is through partnership, is through not ill-intended, and that did take us a while. And the other thing I'll say, there are a couple of good books out there about that. What was the opposite of visionary in that book? Rocket Fuel. Rocket Fuel, great book. Katelyn introduced it to me. It talks literally about the two styles, keeps it very clean and simple. Visionary, and what was the other one called?
The integrator. I think the integrator.
The integrator. Visionary and integrator. And when we read that book, we both plowed through it in a day, and we both went, "Oh my God, you're the visionary, I'm the integrator. You're the kite, I'm the string."
Yeah.
And also, they need to be with each other. There's no doubt that that's the role. We're just unique in that we also raise children. We're also in love with each other, and we've also been doing this for 30 years, and that's really unique. But these are the secret sauce things that I think you're tapping into, that I like to highlight in this platform, because I feel like the next generation takes words like entrepreneurial too loose, or relationship too loose, or even the word divorce, which I highlight in the book, is not allowed in our relationship. It's just not a word to use, because it's not a default option.
Right, exactly.
And that's really important for people to hear when you dive under the sheets a little bit of what we're talking about here. It's not all grandeur. There's a heavy magnitude to it, but there's also those other things that matter. So when Katelyn said it, it really struck a chord with me. And I thought it was really worth.
Well, and relationships take work. And I think that's what your point is that relationships and partnerships, even the best ones out there, we make these assumptions that, oh, well, everything must be sunshine and roses, right? Because look at how well they work together. We don't see the behind the scenes where you have those, all-nighters where you're frustrated and maybe, you're tired and one wants to give up and the other one wants to keep going, or, a situation has been created and you're just feeling all this frustration. And now that's making the two of you, go at one another over things that, again, have nothing to do with you. It's just the situation in the moment. And so you're going, we don't always see that. And I think that I love that you were saying that with the message, because I see sometimes that there's not much grace that's shown in relationships with some of the people that I've interacted with that are maybe just in life in general. I don't even want to peg it on any generation, just in life in general, where there's that lack of understanding that this is hard work, and that if it were easy, I mean, everybody would do it, right? But it's not. And if you really matter and it's really important to you, you're going to put in the effort to anything, whether that's your relationship, your marriage, your partnership in business, or, your relationship with your employees or your friends. It takes work. It's not just something that just happens. You got to put some effort into it.
I think some of the work that I've done, and I'm not always 100% there for sure, but I have tried really hard, because I oftentimes would start with what about this? What about this? What about this? When an idea is brought.
Yeah.
And now I've tried very hard to be like, that's a great idea. Well, how about we dig into what that would look like? So just like a reframing of that has helped so much. So much.
It's so true. I was just had a colleague the other day say that one of the things that she learned recently is to take the word but out of it and say yes and, even take no. So like say no, but say yes and. And I've been trying to do that as well in even my emails, removing the word but, because but creates that, I love it the Worldgate way, is that it does create that negative connotation when I say, yeah, that's a really great idea, Scott, but if I say, yes, that's a really great idea, Scott, and what if we did this, this, and this? Or yes, and have you thought about these things? That now I feel invited and open in the conversation, and I don't feel like we're on the verge of you just shutting me down because you've inserted that word but into it, and now it feels very negative. So now I'm no longer listening to anything positive that you might have to say, because you've already shut my mind off. So now I love that. I think that's a really good, and it's self-awareness, right? We're constantly evolving and growing and learning as we get older. And hopefully we can impart some of this wisdom earlier on the younger generation to maybe make those tweaks that I wish I would have had 20 years ago.
They really are tweaks.
Yeah, they are. They're just tweaks. Yes,
They're constantly
exactly.
evolving. And to Katelyn's credit, and to just piggyback on that and plug the book yet again, we talk about the
Yeah.
Worldgate.
Plug it away. You
I
know.
know. But people
Hold it up.
and people can get to this information, and they can get
Thank
to
you.
this information that I'll describe here.
Thank
But
you.
what's important about that
Yes.
is it's ever evolving. But Katelyn is really sharp in that yes and that self-awareness is really important, such that we realized in our culture at Worldgate that we weren't really communicating that very well. So she took the initiative to actually create our cultural behaviors and call them the Worldgate way.
Yeah.
And it is true, there really are yes and as a logic that we try and impose
Yeah.
on our employees. And it is in the book as an insert in the back of the book if someone wants to grab that. It's for public consumption. There are 16 of them, I think 14 of them that spells out the Worldgate way. But when you take that initiative and you use a platform like this, or you use the book, or you use a 10 card, it does help people with that incremental change. It doesn't have to happen all at once.
No, I like it. Well, Katelyn, one of the things we talked about was just the amount of responsibility that comes, not just running a business, but also being a parent. And with that also comes the self-care. And so what do you do for self-care? Because, sometimes, especially I think as the string, it's really important that you have that self-care, because the kite can drag you all over the place, and can run you through the ringer
Especially if
sometimes.
he's doing his self-care.
Especially if he's doing, yes, exactly. So what is what do you do to kind of help create that balance for yourself?
I am definitely not the best at any of the traditional self-care, like the massages and the facial. I'm not good at that. But I do
Yeah.
exercise almost every day. So I wake up, it is the first thing, I walk my dog real quick and I exercise. Those are it just
Yeah.
makes me feel better. It starts my day. And, I tried to meditate. I've not been very good at that. I try these things, but then what I realized, I think probably over COVID, one of the things that I really just enjoy, and it sort of a lot of places it replaced, let's go have a glass of wine with my friends. We
Yeah.
walked our dogs, and I walk dogs with my
Yeah.
friends, and it is just such a nice, you can connect with your friends, you are outdoors,
Yeah.
you are able to, share the things of your day that maybe you don't always want to share with your
Yeah.
spouse, right? But um that is really self-care for me. Like having that girlfriend time is really important to me. So, again, I'm not the greatest at all the traditional self-care things, but exercise and girl
That's
time
okay.
is probably my key thing.
Well,
Yeah.
and
No, you got to find what
Yeah.
works for you. Because even you said meditation. I meditate, but not in the
Mhm.
traditional sense of
Yeah.
meditating. My meditation is I'm listening to a meditation on my phone while I'm still doing some things in the morning. But what it does is it causes me, as I'm listening to it, I
Mhm.
breathe. So I try to bring my breathing down, and I kind of slow my heart rate a little bit, and get ready for the day. So I think you've got to find what works for you, because what some people consider self-care is not going to be the same for everyone. It's finding what makes you feel good, because some people would look, exercise feels like a chore. Oh, I don't want to exercise, that's not going to make me feel good. But for other people, that's a complete and total outlet for them. And so I think it's really important to find what works for you, but most important is that you're taking
Mhm.
care of yourself and finding
the
that
other thing that,
balance.
that people might not always call self-care that Katelyn is actually exceptional at is eating clean as it complements to working out. She's very good at saying no to the Ben and Jerry's. She's very good at saying no to the Hershey Kisses.
Got way better self-control
Well,
than I do, Katelyn.
this kite is constantly eating that shit. So,
I
so she's
don't
good at helping me get there.
I don't always say no to the wine. I do enjoy the wine.
Again, we got to find the balance, right? It's
Yeah.
all about balance. So,
That's right.
so no, I think that's really good. Well, so you mentioned your girlfriend time. So obviously, partnerships and relationships are important to you. Why do you find that as kind of like the heart of the success? Like, why is that important to
Oh,
you?
I mean, honestly, it's the foundation for me. Like I couldn't
Yeah.
even think about doing half the things I do alone. It's just it's a foundation for me. Like I have to have a partner in almost everything that I do. It's just, it's not
Yeah.
even something I consider not being there, right? So I have a partner in my work life. I have a partner in my home life. They happen to be the same. But I
Yep.
have partners in my friends, right? And they're like parental
Yeah.
mom partners, and they're helping me through
Yeah.
um through all of the different ways that we're approaching, you know, how old we are and how we're managing our kids and what the next steps
Yeah.
are. So those are so important. And then from a work standpoint, I mean, I think you can only flourish with true partnerships, right? So if you have
Yeah.
a work partner who has the same vision and goals that you have, and you can align those visions and goals and are sort of working towards that commonality, like you can't help but
Yeah.
succeed, right? Like it's more,
Yeah.
there's more power to it. You're not just by yourself.
Right.
You have
Right.
this organization or this person that you're able to collaborate with and bounce ideas off of, and having more opinions that can filter into that, achieving that vision, I think is just, again, it's like
Yeah.
a no-brainer for me. It's just how I feel like I've approached
No,
my
I
life,
like that.
honestly.
Did you see that in relationships that your parents had? Did you see like why do you think that that's foundational for you? Like where did that foundation come from in, because like for me, I'm a real
Yeah.
solitude person and have been since I was a child where and part of it was the chaos around me. I found peace in solitude. So for you, why do you think that, like, how did that become your foundation?
Uh, I don't know, without going into like deep therapy conversations here, um,
Yeah, yeah.
honestly feel like it's nature, right? I feel like I was born this way.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
I have just always
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
someone who valued my friendships, have I practically
Yeah.
grew up with my cousins and, at my cousin's house. And so I
Okay.
feel like there was
Yeah.
always this like foundation of like these extra
Kind of that
siblings and
family
these family
tie and
ties.
yeah. Yeah.
And then I have these wonderful girlfriends from college and high school that are
Yeah.
still really important parts of my life. And I feel like that's just always just, I've always built partnerships and relationships and cultivated those at every juncture of my life. And it's just, I can't live without them. Yeah.
I love that. No, it's core to
Yeah.
who you are. It's what makes you Caitlin, and
Yeah.
I love
I
that.
think it's a real gift.
So along the
Well, I was
same,
gonna say it's a real
yeah.
gift
No,
that
go ahead,
Caitlin
Scott.
brings
I didn't
because she
mean.
brings
Yeah.
quality to that too. It's not just about quantity. It's not that she needs to be surrounded by people all the time. It's that these people are of value to that sort of experience of life that she's having. So it's been nice to
Yeah.
watch.
Well, it's kind of grounding for
Very
you, right? It,
grounding.
it creates that, that that you've got that
Mhm.
tribe that's around you that, to Scott's point, it's not like you have to be around everybody all the time, but if you need someone, they're just a phone
Right.
call away or a dog walk away. And that gives, that really does help in the grounding nature because, I think that's, it's important for us to know that we have those. So along those lines, then, who do you think would be your most important, like, professional mentor? Like, who throughout your career has been that person that you're like, wow, they've really helped me?
So I will actually say it's a group of people. So one of my first
Yeah,
professional jobs out of grad school was I worked at what was known as MCI back then, so telecom. They were in Denver
yeah,
too, but
yeah,
I worked in the marketing department, and there were many women leaders at MCI. And there was sort of this tribe of director level women that I sort of reported to, almost all of them at some point. There was a group of them that they called each other the M's. So it was like Meg, Melina, Melissa,
yeah.
Maggie, and a woman named Kathleen. And they were such wonderful female role models. Like they were smart.
Oh,
They were,
yeah,
I will tell you, I still when I have to work on a presentation, I still work on it on paper. I walk to the copier, I grab paper out of the drawer, I put my stack down, and I write my headlines. So I write my headlines on
yeah,
each page, and then I start with go back. I might reshift the pages, and that allows you to do that, right? Like just shifting the pages.
yeah,
And that I learned from a VP that I worked for at the time, whose name was Joyce. And the M's and Kathleen all reported to Joyce. And they were just wonderful role models. They taught me so much. And I feel like there are certain words that, or certain punctuation marks that some of them, just weren't big fans of. And I still notice today, like, oh, I have to change that word,
Yeah.
And they were all, becoming young moms, and they were, understanding of work-life balance. I mean, we worked hard there. Like, we were working long
Yeah.
days and long hours, but it was fulfilling and it was supportive. And
Yeah.
again, certainly there were men there too who were great, right? But these female role models,
Sure.
I feel so lucky to have like a group of them that I still would call like my,
Yeah.
initial mentors, that I still am in touch with many of them, and will call for career
I always
advice,
love to
will
hear
call
that.
for, help. Like, they're still there.
Yeah.
They're still there.
Well, and I think that women are a little more like we tend to be a little more extreme in that we're either have these close female relationships, and we've been fortunate enough to have women who could be mentors and create those relationships, or you've got the opposite experience, right? Where it's you've worked with women who are it's maybe a little more backbitey, a little less collaborative, a little more competitive for
Mhm.
obvious reasons. I mean, women have had to work hard in the workforce, but I think we forget to lift each other up oftentimes. And so it always makes my heart feel good when I hear those stories of, women who have had such a huge impact on your life and that they still have that impact today. Because I think men have a different grounding in all of that, right? So they have female mentors, male mentors, like it just seems a little more fluid. I don't know why, but for, men do seem to have that. Women, it's not as fluid. We have to work a little bit harder, I think, in identifying those, those mentors and those coaches and relationships along the way. So I love that story, and I think that that's really neat that you have that. So
I've witnessed,
yeah.
I've been fortunate to have a front row seat to all of that. And it has also helped me.
Yeah. Well, and you've said before, Scott, that some of your best have been the women, right? Like the women in your life have been some of your strongest drivers and
100%.
supporters and coaches along the way. So, it's kind of interesting that Katelyn's had such a positive experience. Makes you wonder, is there some synergy in all of that as well?
I think there's some transparency, and well, yes, I believe in the fact that for me, I've also had stronger women mentors. Um, and you said it well. I've also had a few men in my life, and actually friends that were guys that I would call mentors. And I think
Yeah.
you're right. I was listening to how you said men seem to have men and women as mentors. Yes,
Yeah.
I erred on women. I think they're emotionally more intelligent. I think they're emotionally more
Yeah.
capable. As a stereotype, I gravitate towards a
Mm-hmm.
woman's ability to communicate versus most men. And but that doesn't
Right.
mean I don't have
Right.
an
Yeah.
appreciation for the men, and that I have mentors that are men, and I'm as manly as I think
For
I need to
sure.
be in this life. But women, it's interesting that
Yeah.
women though have a struggle with what you said a minute ago, and that was sort of realizing you have to work towards having women mentors. It's interesting.
Yes.
Men
Yeah.
don't definitely feel like, I think there has to be a connection there. There's not an intimidation there. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, and I think that that is a piece of it, because there is an inherently competitive side for women, because we worked so hard to find our
right.
position, and I don't want you to take it away from me. So I'm going to tread
Um,
carefully as to how much I'm willing to share and connect with you until I know that I can
yeah.
trust you. Then if I know I can trust you, then it's not like this natural hey, Katelyn, I met you, and now we're going to share, and we're going to be open, and that dialogue. It's not. It's a little bit of it's a process. It's not
Yeah.
as
That's a
easy
good
or
way
as
to put it.
fluid,
It's a
I don't
process.
think.
I don't know that
So
I endure a
yeah,
process as much. I actually follow the
yeah,
kindred more.
yeah,
And
absolutely,
typically women can't follow the kindred more, they get bit, whereas men will recover much
yeah,
easier, men or women, if they're trying to mentor. I've asked men to be mentors, like it wasn't a
yeah,
problem. Like, oh, you're pretty successful, you mentor me. Sounds like women might have a little
yeah.
bit different perspective on that. Yeah, it's
There's
interesting.
I think
there's a
so.
book.
Yeah.
After you read How Did You Get Here? There's another book.
Yes. After
Wait,
you read
wait,
How
what
Did You
book?
Get Here? That's right. You got
What
to read
book?
that one
Yeah.
first.
But there's another book called The Confidence Code. And it is actually
Oh,
a really good book. I read it, and it talks about sort of this whole idea of women and their confidence in the workplace. And really how the salary gap sort of started with like what women asked for, like when you ask for 60,000 and for the same job that a man asked for 75, right? Like it kind of like that, the pay equity really started with the ask. But it's just a really good read. And I remember I still have a part circled in it that I need to read to my daughter, that said, like, if you want your daughter to have the confidence she needs or something like that someday, teach her to be a little bit bad.
Yeah.
Yes,
and
that's
it's
true.
just, because I am a people pleaser. I am to a fault people pleaser. And so, maybe you don't have to be that way. Maybe you can just be a little bit bad, say no a little bit, like, and so it's a good read after you've read the other book.
I like that. We'll put that one in the show notes. I like that. Yeah, that's a good one for sure. Well, so what is one lesson your job has taught you that you think everyone should learn at some point in
Oh my
their
gosh,
life?
Linda, you actually said it earlier. I was like, oh my goodness, like that you popped into my head like saying this, but this whole idea of giving grace, right? Like, I think and I feel like you and I spoke of this once in a meeting, which is this whole idea of like we have to assume that people are not ill-intended, right? People are coming with good intentions, and we never know what's going on in someone's life, right? Unless we ask, unless we are able to give grace. I mean, is them not getting a deliverable done the end of the world for that moment if there is something really hard for them happening, right? Like, we just need to be able to balance and ask if everything's okay and give grace for certain things. And it's a struggle, believe me. Like, I don't always do it. I sometimes am like, why don't I have this, right? But I think if we can just go in with that. There's another book called Smart Tribes, and Smart Tribes talks about like you have to dig into the sort of understanding and the motivations of people and the whys, right? And so the sort of maybe poor performance over a certain period of time may have nothing to do with what that person is capable of, right? And we just need to understand that and have the grace to ask the right questions to, get the most out of our people, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. And it's so important. I was just talking with a colleague yesterday, and she's a little tired and she's kind of burned out. And she's got this, she was thinking about taking some time off, like they're going to do this 3-day weekend and then they're going to take a real vacation. But already in that moment, she's starting to think about how she's going to balance her work because they've got these big projects coming up and all of this. But maybe in that time, and I said, is the work that you're doing going to change the world? Or if you don't deliver in that moment, is the world going to stop rotating on its axis? Because if it's not, it's probably okay to wait until you get back in a couple of days. And I think, it's real easy for me to preach that, not as easy for me to practice it, but it's very true. And it's something that I've been trying to do a little self-reflection on, is the work that we're doing so life-altering that if we have to wait one extra day to get that, is it going to end? And it's not to take away from deadlines and responsibility and accountability.
No, it's
we
to
have to have that. We get paid to do a job. You have to do it.
You're actually complimenting the word grace.
Yeah,
you still own your shit. You're still responsible, but you have to compliment that word grace with how many of us are really doing anything that has to be done that very second against your peak performance refill, doing some self-care for 3 days off. Exactly.
Yeah. No, I think it is. It's so important. Again, and I think those are some lessons we're learning from the younger generation and that came out of COVID and really kind of looking at this whole, I'm sorry, I don't want to work 80 hours, a week. I want to have some time to go and have fun with my friends and find some balance. And I'm going to travel and I'm going to do those things. So I'm sorry, Mr. Employer, your job is not more important to me than the life that I've been put on this planet planet to
Right.
live. And I think,
Right.
there's some lessons in all of that as well, that I think, it's finding that balance. But well, I've loved our conversation. We like to end the show with 3 questions. So here are your 3 questions. If you had to write a book tomorrow, so we already know Scott's an author, but if you had to write a book tomorrow, what would you write about?
So I have to say, I would probably, I told myself, 17 years ago when my first son was born that I was going to write down all the funny stories and I was going to start my own internal blog. I never did. Right. But
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like there would be just
Best of
this
intentions.
potentially humorous mom stories book because
Yeah.
has been a hilarious journey.
I
So
love
I
that.
feel like I'm not as creative in that element as Scott, but if I were forced to take pen to paper, it would probably be that. Yeah.
That's what it would be. I love it. Mom
Yeah.
stories are the best anyway, because when you look back and you think our perspective on things, I just think is there's so much fun and humor, especially now that you've gotten over it. Because, you think
Yeah.
about sometimes in the moment of the crises, or you thought, oh my gosh, the world is going to end because I've been a terrible parent, which of course you were not. But in that moment you felt, so when you get the chance to be retrospective and look back and find a little humor in that situation, and you think, wow, that I can't believe some of the stuff I've survived
Yeah.
in life. So,
Yeah.
so I love that. Well, if you ever decide to do it, I
Thank
will
you.
read that book because I love
Yeah.
those types of stories. So, if you could have coffee with any historical figure, who would you choose?
I would choose Queen Elizabeth
Oh,
because
interesting.
can you imagine the stories she has to tell? Like she has,
No,
I mean,
yeah,
the historical, like I would be then having coffee with 17 different people because of the story she could tell. Like
right.
she's what gone
Yeah,
over how
yeah,
many prime ministers and how many US presidents and gosh, just all the juice
yes,
on the royal family. I mean, just it would be
right.
historically interesting and important, but maybe like some juice too, right?
Yeah,
Scandal.
no, I think you're right. Like a little
Yeah.
gossipy,
Yeah. Yeah.
scandalous. Yeah, that's true. Because yeah, imagine you're right. Some of the
Yes.
behind the scenes stories that she
Yeah.
had for
Well, and she
sure.
Yeah.
was the
So
longest
no, I
reigning
love that
monarch
one.
ever, right? So like she's hit
Yes,
it all.
yeah.
Well, and she saw so
Think about how
yeah,
young she
and
was.
saw so
Yeah.
much, right?
Oh
So,
my
Yeah.
goodness,
I mean, I
yes.
think would just be that's such an interesting it would have to be much longer than
Yeah.
coffee. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
It definitely would. Well, and the sacrifices she made to make
right?
that commitment, it's such a and that she made that with intention to make that sacrifice to dedicate her life
Mhm,
to the crown, versus all the other things she probably could have done with her life that might have even been a little bit more
mhm,
enjoyable than what
mhm.
she
To
did. So,
Caitlin's point, to Caitlin and
so
yours
yeah.
point about her successes, one of the things that I did learn about her that I thought was interesting is her act, not react perspective.
Yeah. Oh
She
yes.
often was a
Yeah.
little late to the game in modernization,
Mm-hmm.
or a little late to the game in an argument, or didn't even enter the game,
Yeah.
but it always panned out to be uh, an action, not a reaction. And I always found I come in
Totally
hot and
agree. Yeah.
fast and let's get it done. And
Yeah, me too. Like I'm ready for the answer immediately type of thing. But she very stoic, right? It's a British way. My mother
yeah,
was the same way, very stoic. She did not have that immediate reaction. You were kind of left wondering, what is this
and
woman going to say to
I would
me?
love to learn that
So
and adapt that, because it served her well. It served the country well, from what I
it
can
did.
see.
It
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
served. Yeah, no, I totally agree. So my last question is, what's the one question you wish we would have asked, and how would you have answered that question?
Oh gosh. Um,
It was all so easy until now.
I know it was all so easy until
Right.
now. I mean, I think it's like if you could do something in business differently, what might that be?
Oh, I like that one.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and I think probably it would be sort of my entry into the entrepreneurial world as a leader in this.
Mm,
Just the idea, like just the learning that like mistakes and failures are learning, right? And I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah, yep.
I just wasn't, I mean, not to like, I was a perfectionist. I didn't make mistakes, right? And
That's
if I
hard.
did, it
Yeah,
was the end of the world. Really, like,
remember that string we were talking about, guys? Remember that string?
Yeah.
I mean, so I just feel like if I
Yeah.
could, even if I could just, talk to anyone that's, coming up in the professional world, like, you really have to look
Mhm.
at every mistake, or if you want to call it a failure, as an opportunity
Yeah.
for learning. Like, what can I learn from this and
Yeah.
what can I do better? Because
I like that.
it will eat you alive if you can't learn to take that approach, right?
Yes,
So I
it
feel like
will.
I wish that
Yeah.
I wish that I had done that earlier. It would have
You'd exercised a little grace for yourself, perhaps, that
I
maybe you
wish I
could have
did that
looked at that a
earlier,
little
yes.
bit differently. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's so true, and you're right, it is. It's so hard, in that moment because you're very when you're so critical, especially when you are someone who is very focused on, "I've never failed at anything I've done. I've always been successful." In entrepreneurship, you are going to fail. In business ownership, you are going to fail. It's gonna take multiple times, and that is really challenging. And so you do have to learn to exercise some grace and forgiveness for yourself, and that those are all opportunities to learn and get better. They're not, to your point, you can call them failures, but they're really not if you've
And I
learned
was going to
something
jump in
from
on
them
that
and you
and
can
talk about
grow.
that for our next gen too. And that is, success doesn't beget money and failure doesn't beget loss of money. And so
Yes,
it's
yeah.
really important, to Caitlin's point, that you look at yourself as being progressive, and the yes and model is hard to
Yeah,
grab. But that's really what she's
it
saying
is.
is, I wish I had more of that yes and perspective. Instead, she
Yes,
called it a
yeah.
failure, and she wished she would have learned that sooner, might be what I would say is what
Yeah.
we're chatting about here at the end. People need to be aware of that, because success is, for me, defined as happiness, and it can be overall, not
Yes.
perfection. General happiness is success. So just parallel, just
Yeah.
sort of complementing what I think we're talking about here. It's for people who might be driven by money. It's not about the money aspect of that. It's about
No.
interpretation and what you do with it.
So
Yeah.
true.
And
So
we're old
true.
now, right,
No.
Kate? I mean, it takes a long time to figure these things out.
Well, speak for yourself, right,
Three
Scott?
plus zero years of career.
Well, I think your point on happiness, right? One of my favorite TED Talks ever that I think I've sent out to our team 5 different times is the Sean Aker happiness TED Talk. Have you seen it, Linda?
Okay.
Oh
No,
my
I haven't
goodness.
seen that one.
He is basically a happiness expert that graduated from Harvard. Like, and
Wow. Well,
it is
send it to
so
me.
good, and he is so energetic, but
Yeah.
it's really about this whole idea of, like, being happy, right?
Right.
And doing
Right.
I
things that make
love
you
that.
happy. And
Yeah.
so yeah,
I love that.
And
No. Yeah, send it to me. We'll put
I
it in the
will.
show notes too, because I think
It's
that'd
so
be a
good.
great one for everyone
Yeah.
to
yeah,
listen to
people
for
would enjoy
sure.
that for sure. And I think that is also the theme of all of what we're doing is happiness doesn't beget a dollar sign. It be and
That's
also
right.
you have to do things that beget the dollar sign to create a different quadrant of happy. Doesn't have to be the only
Yep.
definition of happy. It's we're in a
Absolutely
society that
not. Yeah.
requires work. Thankfully, we're not in a society that requires
Right.
digging
Yeah. You
ditches.
have to have money to live
Right.
in this world. Yeah. We'd be foolish if we were leaving the message that somehow you don't have to have that. You absolutely do, but it does not have to be the be all end all, nor does it define your happiness in life, because there are a lot of very wealthy people who are not
Exactly.
happy. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I love it. Well, Katelyn, I'm so glad that you were here on the show with
This is
us
awesome.
today. I hope everyone enjoyed this as much as I did, and it was nice to see the two of you together. And I think I'm sure that everyone will pick up on there's a reason why the two of you have been together for 30 years, and the success that I think that we've seen through the book that Scott has written, the podcast we're doing here, the Worldgate Way. All of that is indicative of the partnership and relationship that the two of you have developed, and that we can all take a lesson from.
It was
So
fun.
thank you
Thank you,
Thank
both.
you
Kate.
for
Yeah,
having
this
me.
is good. Yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll look forward to talking to everybody
Yeah.
next time. So thanks everyone
Thanks,
for
Linda.
joining us today. Yeah.
Thanks, Katelyn.
Yes, you bet. Thank you. We hope you enjoyed this episode of An Unconventional Guide to Success. If you want to learn more about Katelyn Montgomery, you can follow her on LinkedIn. Her profile is in the show notes. An Unconventional Guide to Success is an inspirational, motivated series hosted by Scott Montgomery and Linda Misegadis, recorded on Riverside.fm. Music, editing, and production by Logan Misegadis. Check out Scott Montgomery's new book, How Did You Get Here, and all the helpful related materials at www.howdidyougethere.com. Thank you for joining us on our journey. If you would like to reach out to us, our contact information is in the show notes.